Okay, there you go. I'll start again. Good afternoon, everybody. Fergus Dolan here from NALA. You're very welcome to our Preparing Learning Materials webinar. I'm going to pass you on to our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Gillian Harris. Gillian is the e-learning development coordinator with NALA, and she's going to talk to you about how she developed an online course for preparing learning materials. So over to you, Gillian.
Thanks very much, Fergus. Hello, everybody. Very happy to be here today to talk about NALA's online course on preparing learning materials. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about the course and then let you know how you can access the course. So the Preparing Learning Materials, it's an online course, a fully online course that you can do at any time, and it's available all year round, and you can go into the course and do part of it and then come back at a later stage. And it takes about 1 hour to complete, and the course is available on NALA's e-learning platform, Learn with NALA. So this course, myself and Helen Ryan worked on this course with Cobblestone Learning, and it's based on the Preparing Learning Materials resource. So I'll just show you a little bit about the course itself. So there are 5 sections in it. So they're the sections there. So the first section is about the context for developing materials. It looks at guidelines for good adult literacy work, and it also talks about tips for helping students identify their needs and goals. And then the second section is around planning and writing your learning materials. So this includes developing learning materials for numeracy and distance and blended learning, and also for ESOL learners, English for speakers of other languages. And then section 3 looks at the design and formatting of the learning materials. So this goes into some plain English tips and design tips. And then the 4th section is called using learning materials. And this is really about, I suppose, simplifying materials for learners, or adapting materials for different levels. And it also goes into helping students engage with learning materials. And then the section 5, which may be useful, you can download worksheets from the resource and you can print these out for your own use. And then also at the end of the course, there are links to other materials for students that you may find useful. So I'll just go into one of the screens on the course itself. And the course, it is made up of text, and then there's some videos as well. So this screen here includes a video, an expert insight video, which was recorded by Mary Bambrick, who's an experienced tutor. And this one is around the guidelines for good adult literacy work. So there's a number of these videos throughout the course. And as well as that, at the end of each section, there's a review with some quiz questions. And these are just to reinforce the learning. And then at the end of the course, everyone who completes the course will get a NALA Professional Development Certificate. So that's just a brief overview of the online course, and I'll just show you now how you can access the course. So as I said before, the course is on NALA's e-learning platform, Learn with NALA. So some of you may know this from the courses for students at levels 1 to 3. So on the website, there is a link to tutor courses. So you click on that, and then it goes through to all the professional development courses that we have at the moment. So you can see at the end, there is the link to register for the Preparing Learning Materials course. So to register, you just need to click on the Register Now link. So as you can see, there's a few other courses. So we started developing these professional development courses back in January 2020. And the first ones that we developed were on integrating literacy. So they're all free to use, and you can do them at any time. So there's an introduction to integrating literacy and a practical guide to it as well. And then we're also working on some other professional development courses at the moment on literacy awareness, and we've started developing one on numeracy resources. So if you check back here, you'll be able to see new courses as they come on board. So back to the preparing learning materials. So you just click on the register now button. And then if you're already registered on Learn with NALA, you can log in with your existing username and password. But if you're new to it, you just need to click on the register button. And then there's a short form where you fill in your name, email address and phone number, and just whether you're teaching in a centre or not. So that's it. And as I said, the courses are free to use. So once you sign up for the course, you can just go straight into it by clicking on a link, and you'll also get an email to say that you've registered and with your registration details. So this is the homepage of the course then. So once you've registered, you can go into the course itself, and then you click on the content button at the top to access it. And as I said, you can do the course in one go. It takes about 1 hour to complete, or you can go in and come back again at a later stage. And you can, come back to get the resources, download the resources. And also, lastly, just there is a survey at the end of the course that we'd love you to fill in. This will just give us feedback on how you found using the course. And you can also suggest ideas for other online courses that you'd like to see developed in the future. So that's it for now. So thanks very much. And yeah, I'd love to hear any feedback that you have on the online courses. You can get in touch with me at gharris@nala.ie. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gillian. That was great, comprehensive. Hope you have found that interesting. Our next speaker is Pauline Hensey. Pauline is a distance learning tutor with NALA, and she, 15 years ago with my colleague Blana Nikaneja and Helen Ryan, she developed the original Preparing Learning Materials book guide. And so just this year with Helen Ryan, she has updated it and modernized it. So over to you, Pauline.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm going to just outline the guide, the resource book, Preparing Learning Materials that NALA have developed. As Fergus said, this was first published in 2006. So what we're seeing here is an updated version from that original resource material. And it very much dovetails or mirrors the course that Gillian was talking about, except it's actually a resource pack. And I think the clue is in the subtitle of the book, A Guide for Literacy and Numeracy Tutors. So the book is not necessarily a recipe book. It's not prescriptive. It has worksheets that people can photocopy, but mostly what it's about is giving you practical suggestions and examples on how to design and create meaningful materials for your learners that you're working with. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look firstly at what are the kind of beliefs or values underpinning the material in the book around literacy and around how adults learn. So I'll very briefly touch on that. And then I'm going to go through the general content of the book. Gillian mentioned there the sections that are on the course, and they're very similar in the book, but I'm going to give you some examples from those sections. And lastly, I'm going to just talk about, well, what's new in this updated version that maybe wasn't there in 2006. So I'll start off by looking at like what are the values that underpin the material of this book around how adult learns. And the first is one that you're probably all very kind of familiar with, and it's that really that adults learn best when there is a collaborative approach, when we kind of learn together in the classroom. Tutors don't really present themselves as the expert, they're more the facilitator for the learner, the guide, and that learners really lead the learning. And probably the second value that underpins this material is that idea of respect and equality, and that learning works best when it's responsive to the lives of learners and to their needs. And that's something I'll come back to around preparing material. And the final one is just to be aware of the different dimensions that literacy learning encompasses. For example, literacy practices often have emotional, personal, and political dimensions for learners. So the four kind of key words there, I suppose, were learners leading the learning, respect and equality, responsive to the lives of learning, and keeping in mind the emotional, political, and personal dimension of learning when we're presenting materials to learners. So in a sense, the pack here, so this resource reminds us to be responsive to the lives of learners and their uses of literacy. In other words, to keep the material real. There are really good existing materials out there, ready-made texts. Indeed, we'll be introducing some of them later on today, but they don't always serve the needs of students all the time. And sometimes we find ourselves in the position of actually having to prepare materials that are more relevant to a learner's need at some particular time. So the pack here reminds us that the starting point in preparing learning materials is helping learners explore their own worlds, explore their own literacy needs, and to consider what works best for them. And just to say, when I talk about literacy, I'm including in that literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy, the three elements. So one of the sections, for example, has a list of questions and activities that might support students name what they'd like to do more effectively. And I'm just going to show you that, Helen, if you want to bring up that first page. So this is in one of the sections of the book, and it's the aim of this particular worksheet here for you is to help you, support students name what they like to do more effectively. So I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, so I'm just going to read that purple band on the top. So, it asks the students, what area are they now interested in working on? Reading, writing, communications, numeracy, or using technology. But then it also asks these other three questions. What's the purpose of this? Who's the audience? Who are they reading to? Is it their child? Is it just themselves for their own interest? Is it to do with work? And what is the situation? So that piece there is to kind of help us to support students in exploring their own needs and their own uses of literacy and what they want to cover in the classes that we offer. And I suppose the suggestion is that if we focus on students' uses of literacy in their daily lives as a starting point to preparing materials with them, that then we can become sensitive to the changing nature of their needs and of their lives. For example, if we are working with a student whose child starts primary school, then often that student is thrown into the practices of primary school, maybe having to read a book list, maybe having to read a note from school, maybe to have to write in a diary. So if we, as a starting point to using materials with learners or making materials for learners, if we go back to looking at what are the uses, what do you need this for, then it helps us answer or answer their needs. And indeed, like we've seen that, I suppose, in the past year when so many of our lives moved online. In my experience, for those students that had access to technology, they really wanted to try and learn how to engage in digital practices. And in making it real, the guide also challenges us to think about how we pose questions when making a worksheet. And this is probably best illustrated by looking at the numeracy section. So maybe we'll look at the next page then. Okay, here we have an example, 2 examples of a question around sharing a pizza. So the first question is, you've gone out for a pizza with 2 of your friends. You're going to share the cost. Let's say the pizza cost €18.20. How would you and your friends pay for it? So there's a very open-ended question. How would you and your friends pay for it? So some might say, we'd estimate the cost and just split it, and leave some money for a tip. Others might say, well, look, we take it in turns to share the cost. Others might say, well, actually, we use Revolut, and one of us goes home and one of us pay and the others Revolut the price. So what we're looking at here is kind of a real world problem with real world answers and varied different kind of responses. Example 2 then, 3 friends went out for a pizza and shared the costs equally. The total cost of the pizza was €18.20. How much did each person pay? Arguably here we have the same content. We have a pizza, we have friends going out, we have sharing the cost, we have the price, but the format of the question is much, rather than being a real kind of life problem, is much more a mathematical one. Adults often recognize this as school maths, so they have to kind of divide, by 3 to get the answer. And some adults will want to master this, they'll want to master school maths, but others will want to focus on the real world around them. And so that I think the pack gives examples of how we can look at how we can think about posing problems on our worksheets that might be more real for the learner, if that's what the learner wants. And the pack also challenges us to think about cultural inclusion and appropriateness when preparing material. And this is particularly around the text we use and also the visuals that we use. It's plenty of advice and checklists to support the development of materials. It does have the 5 sections that Gillian talked about. The first section looks at our beliefs and understandings around preparing materials. The second section, as she explained, talks about what to consider when you're starting to prepare materials, and it has particular advice for ESOL learning, numeracy, distance learning, and blended learning. The third section gives tips for designing and formatting materials, and this draws on Nala's work on plain English and on their writing and design tip booklet. And I have an example from that, because this, when I was preparing materials, I really didn't have kind of the knowledge of what kind of fonts are best, what are most readable. So maybe if we look at the next piece, Helen, we're passing that one, sorry. Yeah, so here's an example of one of the pages from the section 3, giving tips for designing and formatting materials. So the first part here is choose a readable typeface, and here you have an example of two words, the word word, okay? One has kind of tails on it and strokes a serif typeface, and the other doesn't. The recommendation is that we use the one without the tails, that's easier for students to read. Now, I actually hadn't considered this in my own practice as a distance learning tutor. And then this section also talks about line spacing, and it talks about what's easier in terms of aligning your text, that it should be towards the left. Again, that is something I hadn't clearly understood. And there's lots of other advice in this section. I've only given you an example of one page. They've really interesting stuff on visuals and how to combine a visual and text. And it's really useful information on plain English, in other words, the kind of words that we should be avoiding and what we can use to substitute. And so that section is tips for designing and formatting materials. And section 4 is tips for helping students to engage with the material. And this talks about like previewing our worksheet first, testing it out to make sure it's clear. And this section also gives us lots of examples of activities and exercises we can include on the worksheet. And I'm just going to look at that part here. So now it's probably very hard for you to see this. So again, I'll read it out. So it talks about like, okay, if our, the kind of activities we can use depending on what the learning outcome for the worksheet is. We could simply just get a learner to think out the solution, or write it down, which is probably commonly what we ask learners to do, or just talk about it. What's happening here? Just talk about what's happening, or practice a skill, or draw, or video, or reflect on themselves as learners. So in this section, you'll get these tips to kind of, which will help you clarify, well, actually, what is the learning outcome here and what activity might match that? And then in the last section, section 5, this is where we have sample worksheets. I'll go on to the next one there, the creative writing worksheet as such, Helen. So it's the next one down. Yeah, very simple creative writing worksheet, but there's lots of them. There's ones on skimming, on scanning, on numeracy, on ESOL learning. But alongside each worksheet, we look at the design features of them and the learning outcome that's for each worksheet, and we discuss that. And we also discuss with the simplification. We say, well, what is simplification? What is scanning? So beside each of these worksheets, there's an explanation of the design features of them, and also what the learning outcome is. And then there's a fabulous list of resources, both online and hard copy, that students, tutors, learners can avail of. So that's the pack. And I just want to finish by saying, how does it differ? Like, why did we feel the need to develop a new one? Good news is it's kind of bigger. There's more sample material in it, so that's kind of useful. But I suppose in reflection, the biggest thing, the biggest difference between both is the digital aspect. We live in a world where text and communication is moving towards the visual and the digital, and the guide reflects this. Online is where many of our students are now coming across text. For example, if students have to fill out a form, the question is the form online? Is the form on a laptop, or is it on paper? And when we're designing our materials, we need to think about this. WhatsApp messages, social media, online job application, discussion forums, really a lot of that is replacing our traditional handwriting equivalent. So when we're preparing materials, we need to think about that, and the guide references this kind of move to online learning as well. Like we look at, for example, what are the challenges, like with reading. If somebody is reading online now, think of all the additional challenges they have to negotiate, pop-ups, hyperlinks that kind of come when you're in the middle of reading something, audio clips. So what's happening now is that learners, when they're reading online, have to make decisions. It's no longer as simply reading from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. There's kind of decisions to make. Do I share this with anyone? Do I click this link? How do I get out of this pop-up? So the guide kind of discusses these. There's probably room to do more work on this in the future in terms of the challenges around reading and writing online for learners. The guide also recognizes that the growth in technology, gives us tools to encourage learners to collaborate, and tools for learners. And there's links there to these tools and to other webinars that explain them that NALA have developed. So that's it. That's the kind of a general brief look at this resource. We hope, obviously, it's very useful to you in your work in literacy. Thanks.
Pauline, thanks a million. That was great, really insightful. So I hope you all enjoyed that and have got a good idea now about what the Preparing Learning Materials Guide is about. And Helen, thanks. Helen has put in a link to the guide into the chat function, so you can have a look at that. So thanks a million, Pauline. Our next speaker is Margaret Murray. Margaret is the Student and Membership Officer with NALA. And Margaret developed Digital Matters and At's interesting student workbooks with Helen Ryan, and she's here to talk about those workbooks. Over to you, Margaret.
Thanks, Fergus. Hello, everybody. I'm going to tell you a little bit first just about the NALA's student work. So we've three kind of key areas of NALA's student work. We've a student subcommittee of our board, and that's made up of about 14 students from around the country. And we also organise student days. Pre-COVID times, we'd have two during the year, one in Dublin and one outside Dublin, and we'd move the one outside Dublin around the country. And thirdly, we have a student development fund, which is small amounts of money, usually about $650. This year we had a larger amounts, but it's for non-tuition student activities, a collective kind of activity for students. And traditionally, groups have gone to things like the Dáil or visited historic places or done fun things like paintballing and things like that. I've put up, there's barista training happening this year, which I think was Youth Reach in Roscommon. And we're also giving money this year for IT, to purchase IT equipment. So I'm going to tell you a little bit then about the Digital Matters booklet. Just see, can I get the next slide here? So we had been working, can you see that okay there? The Digital Matters one, you might just let me know.
Yes.
Perfect, okay. We had been working, as you can imagine, with COVID last year. During the summertime, we had our first meeting online of the student subcommittee after, the close down in March. And it took tremendous effort to get people to be able to go online, which I'm sure all of you know about. It was fierce complicated, and we were very aware, I suppose, of the difficulties for students beginning to use more technology. And we were also aware that there is good resources out there, such as Age Action. Get Connected is another website that Bray Adult Learning Centre have brought out. And I suppose we were just conscious that a booklet of this format would be good. We wouldn't have probably come to that point until at the end of last year, we had money left over from the Student Development Fund, because centres, of course, couldn't, do their collective kind of student activities. So it prompted us to think what we could provide that would be useful to students. So we were delighted to be able to do this publication of Digital Matters, and the other one I'm going to talk about, the distance learner, making that called That's Interesting, and also the workbook that accompanies Voices. So just to tell you a little bit about Digital Matters, this publication is available now, and it had 6 chapters. It has 6 chapters, Being Wise Online, Phones, a chapter on phones that includes a very basic phone. Sometimes we know from previous student days where we've had workshops on using phones that sometimes there's things like calculators and sending photos by text, say that students may not be able to use on their basic phone, and also this covers smartphones and apps and searching online and social media, and the last one is on podcasts. Again, through the fund in 2019, we had asked about podcasts, and we knew that 10% of students across all centres like Youth Reach, but also the adult literacy centres, were using podcasts already, which I think as educators, people might not have thought of so much. But podcasts can be a great way to learn about a new topic, particularly if you learn by listening. And I think there's tremendous potential there for podcasts to be used for learning. We were very lucky to be able to work with Kathy Orr and Fiona Higgins, who wrote 4 of the 6 chapters. So we were grateful to them, working with them on it. and Helen, Ryan and myself worked on it as well. So that's mostly with digital matters. It's available to download, and as a publication, it's quite useful to download it because of the links. And I'll just give you a little brief at the end about how to download it. So I'm going to tell you about a second publication now called That's Interesting, which this was we sort of had the information, the worksheets on this. So NALA produces a distance learning worksheet each month. Edel Donlan writes those for NALA, and they're sent out with our membership email once a month to all our members. And our centres often print them out and leave them, say, around the centre so students can have a look at them. But what they are is a topical kind of article of one page, say, and it might be 2 short articles or one on one topic. But for example, when the census was out, there was an article on that. And we have got feedback from students that sometimes people maybe zone out of the news, you know, don't feel so connected to all the news that's happening, but that they've found these worksheets quite useful because they're quite topical a lot of the time. So there's the article on the front of it, and then on the back there's exercises on, it could be based on the text, or it could be separate exercises on grammar and maths. So a sort of a 2-page format. So we had those going back a number of years, and we thought, gosh, it'd be nice to put them together in a publication. So That's Interesting is that publication, and it's also available online. Let me see, I suppose just to make a point that it's not as easy as it sounds, putting together and making a publication. There was quite a lot of editing with this, and just looking at the digital matters one, you might start off thinking, okay, you know, for example, sending a text, sending a photo by text, you might think, okay, we've got that down now. And but you start looking at it, and actually there's 3 ways to send a photo by text. And you know, when you tease out the material and have a look at it, sometimes, you know, there's a little bit more work to get it to a stage where you're, I suppose, satisfied that it covers the topic adequately. And so, yeah, just to say that it takes a bit of time. There's quite a bit of editing for all these documents, but we hope there's not too many mistakes in them, and that you get a good bit of enjoyment out of them. So just to tell you where to download them, you can download them from the NALA website, and if you do a search with the title on the top right-hand search button there on NALA's website, you'll find them. The other way to find them is they're under tutor resources and under student workbooks. I think they're on page 2 just at the minute on our website. And I thought I'd take this opportunity to tell you as tutors and organisers that we are having student webinars next week, and it'd be fantastic if you could tell students about those webinars. They're replacing our student days when we can't hold them in person at the moment. But they're on very good topics that we would have got feedback from students on, or really from students and from our overall work with students. We've kind of researched what's good topics, and we asked members as well what are good topics. So they're on looking after your well-being starting next Monday on the 11th of October. There's one on, and actually just on that we have the clinical director from Aware is doing that talk, so I think it'll be very good. We've one on being wise online. We've one on public speaking, an introduction to that with Rory McKiernan, and one of the authors from the Voices book is doing a workshop for us, Ciara Geraghty, on creative writing on the 19th of October. And the last one then is tips for adult learning, and we're delighted to be working with Bray Adult Learning Centre on that. They're going to really present that with students, with 2 students from there as well speaking. So just if you get a chance, if you could tell students about those just over the coming days. You do need to book, but anybody can ring me if they need a hand with that. And so that's what I'd like to, that's me finished, Fergus. I'll certainly be available to take questions at the end.
Okay, thanks very much, Margaret. 2 fantastic student workbooks there. So I hope you found that interesting and will use them. and get them. Our final speaker today is my colleague Helen Ryan. Helen is the policy officer with NALA, and Helen has been involved in all these projects which the different speakers have mentioned today. And Helen is going to talk to you today about the Voices project. So it's a reader and a workbook and how she developed those. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Fergus. So hello, everybody. And this was the third student workbook that we have today. It supports a reader called Voices. So this is this lovely reader here. It's a thin book that I hope every local adult literacy centre, I know we launched this now, it's over a year ago. And people probably remember the Open Door series a couple of years ago that we had. New Ireland has worked on it with one of our very strong advocates, Patricia Scanlon, the author, was a librarian and began that whole project. So we were talking to Patricia a while ago, mentioned the fact that we hadn't had a reader in a while, and libraries were saying that they would love to have some new resources for sort of beginner learners. And so the conversation began about maybe getting together a number of authors to write stories. So that's what came from that reader Voices. So I hope you have seen the book, and it's there's about 6,000 copies of the book out in local libraries. So I'd urge you, like I've been doing, I've about 4 libraries I go into regularly, and I've been in poking around the easy to read section, checking have they got the Voices. And as I say, it's edited by Patricia Scanlon, you'll see it there. And just to make sure that lots of the libraries, I know Kevin Street, for example, had an exhibition and they were showing Voices, and to encourage people to borrow it from the library. And it's also available on the Borrow Box, which is to be able to read it as an e-book. And then hopefully all of your local centres, and again, we might have more books to go out again, you've got some of these for your own learners yourselves. So similar to Margaret's position there, when she was talking about funding, and we were thinking, what could we do for students, and what hadn't been done in a while was an actual workbook based on particular materials. So that's where this idea came from, this idea of taking the 27 short stories from lots of famous writers in there, and maybe could we do some worksheets and activities around this. And so I took it on as a project, and I worked with Pauline Hensey, who you just heard from earlier on, and we just looked at, and we've done a lot of workbooks over the years. People might remember with our Read Right Now series, and our there's lots of worksheets on it. We have a really good resource at Tutors Hub on our website that has hundreds of worksheets, and you can actually go to the website and look them up according to level and according to topic. So we had a lot of worksheets, and there are a lot of worksheets there. But like what Margaret said, it's not as easy sometimes as just pulling sheets out of nowhere. When you're working with your learners, you might be working on a piece of work and design a worksheet around that. So again, thought this was a nice idea to take a couple of different types of worksheets to go with the reader, and as I say, the stories that hopefully you are using in your class. So what I did was there's 27 stories, and we designed 2 worksheets for each story. And again, try to give a nice blend. And again, when you're working with your learners, I'm sure you're always thinking, will I use some comprehension? Will I go with sort of give them some text and ask questions? Will maybe you want to be doing some close exercises and different pieces where you're looking for recall there, and how building up the reading and the vocabulary. But then there's also some nice things around some fun exercises like crosswords, word searches, puzzles. We tried to put a few of them into the Voices Matters as well. And then trying to look at worksheets around sort of more opinion and personal development pieces. So we have a nice one in there over in A Good Woman there, the story there written by Marita Conlon McKenna. We were asking people, what do you think makes a good person? So trying to, again, have a worksheet that gets people thinking and build in a bit of that creative writing, which Pauline showed you an example earlier on as well. We've a couple of them in there where there's some really good stories here to say in the reader that deal with some really good topics and create some great conversations. We've had some really good feedback from tutors and learners. In particular, if anyone's read the first story there, Gurrier in the Desmond, that was by Blind Boy Boat Club, and some of the feedback we got there, people, first of all, were discovering names of cheeses that they'd never heard of. So that's really good. Here's new words, what do they mean? But the story is actually very deep around men and male perspective of conversation and how they talk to each other. And within it, I won't ruin it for anyone that has yet to read the story, but there are insinuations there about things that have happened within the community and what does that mean. And that particular story, I know in one group of learners, opened up a topic of discussion and brought people into a conversation within a class where they may not have previously contributed confidently around it. So we're trying to come up with some worksheets then after you've maybe read the story within your class or borrowed it and suggested that people take it home and read them. What would they look like? So I think the opinions and the personal development pieces were good as well. I don't have a huge amount of numeracy worksheets in the workbook because there wasn't huge scope. There's one, Graham Norton writes a good story called The Party, just in that one, and I did put a numeracy sheet on that. So I think there's another scope for maybe looking at some numeracy worksheets to go with reading pieces as well in a future project perhaps. And then finally, there were some around the more technical spelling and grammar, punctuation. So we did throw a worksheet in, the odd one on punctuation or so there are nouns or contractions. But really it was trying to get a mix of worksheets for tutors to be able to use with their learners. And I hope it gives you some ideas as well around how you can even adapt some of these again for learners at a more beginner level, or indeed if you want other ideas for using them with other with other readers and other work that you're doing. So we definitely welcome any feedback. I'll put the link into the chat box in a minute where you can download this. And if people, if you would like copies of this, and we'll be coming to this, we'll send a link out with an evaluation email where you can get a copy of this book and other ones as well. Now, is that okay, Fergus?
Yeah, thanks very much, Helen. And as Helen said, she'll put links into the chat box on that. So at this stage, we've come to Q&A. We've got 15 minutes left. So there's two options on the Q&A. If you'd like to type in a question or a comment in the chat function, we can read that out and deal with it. Or if you prefer, you can unmute yourself and ask us a question. So whatever suits you. So don't be shy. Just comments there, Helen, so far. So Paula Cannon is saying, I'm working with the Voices Matter books and I'm delighted to see that there is a workbook to go with this. Thanks, Paula, for that. I can see Helen has downloaded Digital Matters, and that's interesting, into the chat function. And she's also downloaded.
Fergus, I suppose just to say that, so all of these resources today, and there's another resource that we launched last week called Facts Matters. It's a guide around media literacy. So we've actually got 5 brand new resources, three resources for students you heard about today, the Preparing Learning Materials and Facts Matter, that all of your local ETBs, if a lot of people I know are here from ETBs, a lot of your local services and FET directors and ALOs and AEOs were sent emails around the new resources with an order form, and a lot of your centres have ordered them. So thank you for that, and we've had great response. They're all being processed now in the next few weeks, so you'll start getting boxes into your local centres, and I hope you'll have access to them. And again, we'll be doing another round again, but I will send links. I know sometimes people would like to get a copy for themselves, and we'll be able to send them out. So they're on their way, as I say, Fergus, and definitely your library has tons of the reader. So that's the reader book, which is a really good read for people, I think, and get your learners to have a look. And then, as I say, the workbook, we will be able to send those out to you as well. So
thanks, Helen. I'm just in the chat box. I see there's a message from Mary Jo Deegan. Thanks, Mary Jo. We're using both the Voices book and the workbook in our literacy and creative writing classes. It's a very useful resource. Thanks for that.
Great. There's a comment there, Fergus, just about how to access the webinars for students, Margaret. So maybe we'll just put the link to the student webinars into the chat box.
Do you want to talk about that, Margaret? You're muted at the moment.
Sorry, just getting that link there. I'm going to put it in the text now. There it is.
Okay.
Brilliant. All right. So you do need to book in, but it's not the worst. It's just your name and your email for booking in, and from there. So what happens, there's a student webinar series, and so basically they're under events on the NALA website, and they're listed. That link will bring you to the lot of them, and you can click from that link. But they're also under events separately coming up over the next 2 weeks. And you click on the webinar and click register, and you're asked for your email, your name and your email, and then you get sent a Zoom link for it.
So just like today, just when Margaret's promoting NALA events, I might as well stick my oar in. The Maths Week is the 18th to the 22nd of October, and NALA have got a numeracy webinar on every day. They're either on at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. So on maths anxiety, on geometry, on algebra. So have a look. Once again, you go to the NALA website and look under upcoming events, and there you see the 5 numeracy webinars, and they're all free. So just a few more comments for Helen and the others. Let me see.
Yeah, Danny was wondering just there about the, I suppose I might have confused you by putting up 2 books there. So the workbook today that we're promoting is this one. This is with the worksheets. And Danny, what we have here is this is the reader. So this is out about a year now, and I hope all centres would have been sent this, or they ordered copies, and there's about 6,000 of them, as I said, in every library. And you can buy them from New Ireland as well. I mean, they're out in the field. So this is the one where the short stories are. And today, really, we're talking about the workbook that goes with that. But contact us if people don't have copies and whatever. When we send the email out later on, you can come back and let us know, and we can get you a copy.
Okay. Unless there are any other questions, you might unmute yourself now and ask a question, because we're going to wrap it up now, because I don't see any other questions or comments in the chat box. Just Danny saying, yeah, okay, Danny, thanks a million. Glad you enjoyed that, and glad that's cleared up. So maybe we'll wrap it up there now, and it just leaves me once again to thank our speakers, Helen Ryan, Gillian Harris, Margaret Murray, and Pauline Hensey. And thank you for joining in, and I hope you found this useful. And we will be sending a follow-on on how, as Helen said, you can order any of the packs through your ALO, your adult literacy scheme. The information sent out to FET directors, AOs and ALOs, and also we'll send out an option of you can order them for yourself too. So lots of people are saying thank you, very useful, very helpful. So thanks everybody, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Is there anything else, Helen, we need to add at this stage?
No, I mean, I think everyone mentioned it.